Hey, what's going on, everybody? Justin here, and in this video, we're going to be doing my April wrap-up. I know I'm so far behind on wrap-ups and book hauls and everything. I have pretty much no excuse. I say that every time, but my plan is now I'm going to do one a week for the next, 3 or 4 weeks, and I'll do my April, May, June, and then hopefully I'll be able to do my July one, kind of like in the middle of August, somewhat on time, something like that. I guess that's sort of the plan. But yeah, I don't know. I've just been completely falling behind on pretty much everything in existence in my life. So, I'm just playing catch up, just for fun. So we're gonna be doing my April wrap up in this video. And in the month of April, I participated in the Owls Readathon, hosted by Book Roast. It's a Harry Potter sort of themed yearly readathon. I'm in preparation for a Newt's readathon, though I don't think I'll be doing the Newts this year. But anyways, I can't exactly remember all the prompts. And I was just like, you know, if I go over all 12 books in every single detail I wanted to, this video will be like a million years long. So we're just gonna go forgo the prompts a little bit and just kind of briefly go over all the books, the 12 books that I read in the month of April for that readathon. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get started. We're gonna get started with the ones that I don't have because I forgot to grab the other ones off the shelves, and if I can't find them fast enough, I'm gonna have to pause the video so I can go collect them all. But let's just start with the ones that I don't physically own. So first up, we have Radioactive Evolution by Richard Hummel. I was sent an audiobook actually of this work by the publisher, which is really interesting. I thought it was okay. It's a dystopian, futuristic science fantasy novel. And something I could kind of compare it to, it's a little bit like Aragon in the sense that the main character has like kind of a bond with a dragon that he sort of discovers in his post-apocalyptic in the post-apocalyptic future. I would say it's a little bit definitely old, like obviously for an older audience than Aragon. I wouldn't. It's not like, it's definitely darker, but it's definitely not like grim dark or anything like that per se. I think it definitely has potential. I think most of the problems lay with the pacing of the book. A lot of the scenarios seem kind of forced in a way, and I don't know if that's partly because it's sort of lit RPG. I'm not very fluent in that genre. Obviously, that was the first work that I'd ever read, and it's definitely not hardcore lit RPG. If you are a fan of that genre, but it definitely takes obviously kind of video gamey elements into the work. But overall, I thought the characters definitely had potential in the core concepts of the book. Sort of with an oppressive regime that lives sort of in Sky Cities, kind of oppressing the people that are kind of left on a post-apocalyptic nuclear war Earth. It's kind of an interesting, definitely interesting concept, and just having kind of, like science fantasy monsters based on like human, or not human, based on like real world kind of creatures and stuff, but obviously with sort of mutated elements, definitely. I just thought it made for a pretty cool idea for a book. So there's Radioactive Evolution. Another one that I don't physically own is Stardust, which I also listened to in audiobook format. And since I did it in April, that's why I didn't do it for the book trial, so there'd only be like a 6 or 7 week difference in like trying to reread it, which would just be kind of like silly for me. Overall, I thought it was really good. Neil Gaiman is just a really good storyteller, and it kind of reminded me in a way of sort of the old style fairy tale retellings, and also things like maybe a little bit sort of like T.H. White's Once and Future King, kind of that like sort of whimsy but kind of serious kind of retelling combined together. Overall, like I said, it's a Neil Gaiman work, so it's not, there are a lot of kind of loose ends that come together kind of arbitrarily in a way, just for the sake of telling a good story. But a lot of the, like I said, or in the previous work, a lot of the themes and stuff that we're dealing with in Stardust, sort of the coming of age sort of thing, and kind of chasing ideals, stuff like that, are definitely touched upon quite a bit in the book, and that's why I really enjoyed it. Alright, another one that I don't have that I read on my Kindle from NetGalley was Plant Lore and Legend by Ruth Binney. I was kind of disappointed with this one. I like nature books a lot, and this one sounded really cool, kind of dealing with sort of the folklore, and I was hoping more for like sort of the history behind a lot of these sort of common plants, whether it's for like medicinal use or just sort of traditional use, maybe in like ceremonies or weddings, what have you. And it definitely touched upon that sort of stuff quite a bit. I mean, that is what the book was sort of about. But the book was really short, and it dealt with quite a few plants, at least 100, I'd say. But that only left maybe like a page or two or three at most for pretty much all the plants that were ever discussed. So you don't really get a whole lot of detail, I guess. And a lot of it is just sort of was very similar and kind of repetitive for different weeds and flowers and things like that. So I guess I would have liked to have seen it a little bit scaled down a little bit more, maybe talking a little bit about less variety, like not every single species that has a tail behind it, but kind of picking maybe a couple dozen and going into a lot more depth on those particular species of plant. Okay, another one is actually a great courses, or one of the great courses from the teaching company that I listened to, and it's The Ethics of Aristotle, and this was by Joseph Kostersky. I think this would be really good for anyone wanting to get into Aristotle. The Nicomachean Ethics is one of his sort of, cornerstone works, I guess, dealing with dealing kind of with moral philosophy, stuff like that, rather than sort of his biological kind of more sciencey sort of works. But between the obviously the politics and the Nicomachean Ethics being like the two big ones on the human side of things, and I think this would be really, really good for anyone wanting to dive into Aristotle's like sort of moral philosophy, especially obviously dealing with the human condition, stuff like that. However, I will say for anyone that's already sort of read Aristotle or looked into Aristotle in the past, this might not be the book for you unless you're really interested in the Nicomachean Ethics. A lot of the concepts that were dealt with were pretty basic. They were definitely well done. I just would have liked to see a little bit more in depth, since it was just it wasn't a course on Aristotle as a whole. It was literally just a course on the ethics of Aristotle from the Nicomachean Ethics. So I think a little bit more detail could have been had, I suppose. But like I said, if you're just really interested for the first time in diving into this particular subject, this would be an excellent way to start off. And one last one that I listened to in audiobook format was This Is Your Brain on Parasites by Kathleen McAuliffe. And this is obviously with the title dealing with sort of mostly bacterial parasites and viral parasites that can affect humans, and how possibly they could affect sort of our emotions and mental capacities, things like that, sort of unconsciously. It was definitely interesting to learn about a bunch of different diseases and stuff that a lot of the human population on the planet has, but it was kind of interesting to see how it may or may not actually affect us, whether we know it or not, with kind of like the chemistry like in our brains, things like that. However, the book kind of went on tangents like quite a bit. I think if it would have stuck more on actual actual parasites in that affect humans, I think that definitely would have helped the book out a little bit better. Just for example, one of the biggest tangents was we had like a chapter or two or three on just sort of the whole emotion of disgust and sort of where it came from, and just kind of going on and on about sort of that. And while that was kind of interesting, and it probably definitely fit in with the concept of the book, and I probably wouldn't even mind it if it would have been pared down a little bit, but it just kind of kept going and going on all these tangents that were sort of related to parasites, but only, like I said, only tangentially or vaguely. So I think if the book was just a little bit more, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, maybe concise, I guess, or sticking with the topic at hand, I think it would have turned out a little bit better. But it's still definitely an interesting book if that sounds like something you're interested with, parasitology. I don't know if is that even the word. There's probably a more technical term for that, but anyways, like I said, pretty good book. If you're interested in it, definitely kind of lost its course a little bit, especially towards the end. Alright, so now let's go on to some of the books that I actually do own. So, first up we have The Sword and the Stone by T.H. White. and I'm so glad I finally actually went to start reading this. It's part of the Once and Future King cycle, obviously an Arthurian sort of retelling. Sword in the Stone, the Disney movies based on Tate White's version of the Sword in the Stone retelling, which is really cool. Just the combination of silliness and whimsy with really sobering and serious topics, particularly with, is might right, that sort of kind of like moral justice theme going on. I just really enjoy The Sword in the Stone. And actually, if you guys know me with my fantasy, I am not really good at finishing series. However, I'm already on the 4th book of this month, Candle in the Wind, because I've read a book from this omnibus edition each month since I read it, the first one here in April, is how much I enjoyed sort of Tate White's narration of this sort of Arthurian retelling. But in The Sword in the Stone, we have young Arthur basically growing up in Sir Ector's castle with the tutor of Merlin, and his T.H. White's sort of narrative style, where he brings in like modern day elements as sort of commentary to kind of throw examples to contrast with sort of the medieval upbringing and stuff. It's just really fun. Merlin's tutelage of Arthur, transforming him into different animals and stuff, really struck a chord with me, just because I love the life sciences and animals and all that sort of stuff. Just really enjoyable, just really witty. Definitely encourage you guys to check it out if you like old school fantasy, or if you're really into kind of King Arthur or Arthurian legends, stuff like that, and you haven't read T.H. White's Once and Future King, you definitely need to check it out. Alright, another one is Life in a Medieval Village by Joseph and Francis Gies, and I have the book, I just had to find it real fast, and it's right here. There's 3 books in this sort of series. There's Life in a Medieval Castle, Medieval Village, and Medieval City. I finished Medieval City last year, and I thought that one was top notch. This one was still really good. I wouldn't put it on quite on the same level as Medieval City, and it's because a lot of the arguments and topics in a Medieval Village were a little more, maybe not abstract, but they weren't as maybe detailed, I should say, as Life in a Medieval City, because that one the whole life in Medieval City could be cut down and broken down into several different distinct parts. For example, all the different occupations, all the different sort of social classes, stuff like that, different events in the city. Whereas in a medieval village, it's far more homogenous, which obviously lends itself to its own interesting kind of aspects. However, in a sense, it almost wasn't like quite enough. I don't know, it just wasn't enough detail for my liking, and that was sort of a lot of assumptions. Obviously, dealing with sort of the archaeological record has its own problems, I guess, with medieval villages, because there are quite a few excavations and stuff. However, the locations of them kind of do pose problems, and obviously, for example, with Life in a Medieval Village, one particular village in England is sort of taken as the archetype for the book, and they even admit that kind of poses problems because villages were kind of different all over the place in England, let alone in like other countries and stuff. So I think Medieval City sort of had that problem as well. However, is able to address it a little bit better. Still, it's a really good social history if you want to learn what life was like for regular people in medieval villages. I would definitely give this book a try, or if you're interested in other aspects of medieval social life, any of the other books in this series would be a good place to start. Alright, next up we have The Romans and Their Gods, and I have it somewhere right here. This is by Ogilvy. I thought this was an interesting book. It's definitely in kind of the old, kind of dusty historian sort of monograph type style, where it's almost more like just a really, really long essay. And the first half is sort of dealing with broad concepts of Roman religion and stuff, and definitely dealing with sort of how do I describe it? Sort of how orthopraxy was definitely more important than orthodoxy. And what that basically means is orthodoxy means believing in the right stuff, whereas orthopraxy is essentially just doing the right stuff. So in Roman religion, it didn't necessarily matter as much if you actually believed in the Roman gods per se, with like, you know, the kind of concepts of faith and stuff. But as long as you went through the rituals and the traditions and, you know, performed all the rites properly, and sort of just made sure that you kind of followed them and everything would still turn out pretty pretty good, whether you kind of didn't really believe in what you were doing or not. But it was definitely interesting to see that sort of contrast to a lot of the sort of Abrahamic religions and stuff. Definitely, like I said, definitely an interesting contrast. But what was interesting too about this book is the second half took a really interesting take, and what the author did was essentially go through the entire Roman calendar month by month by month, and sort of list and just discuss each Roman festival or holiday that, you know, happened in that month. At first I thought that was going to be kind of tedious, but it was definitely interesting to see, with the flow of the seasons, and over the course of the year, sort of different big events, bigger festivals, things like that were kind of going on, and sort of what it would be like, especially for someone living in either Rome itself or kind of in its environs, just kind of what life would be like on a daily level in regards to like kind of the cultural, religious sort of feeling of the people. So I thought that was definitely interesting. I encourage you guys to check it out if you want to be, or if you want to look into Roman religion and you're looking for a shortish work. Definitely, his thing was only like 120 or 150 pages. All right, next up was another book that I received from a marketing agency. And this one, I took another stab at to branch out and try something different. And it's The Book of Mistakes by Skip Pritchard. And this is kind of a self-help book. I'm gonna do a dedicated video on it soon, hopefully. But I don't know. It's like one of the weirdest books I've ever read. It's sort of a self-help book, but it's mostly narrated through like kind of a fictional story. But except that story also has an ancient manuscript, which is partly why I kind of like accepted the book. I thought it was going to be like an ancient manuscript that like the author like kind of like used like some sort of Greek philosophical work or something. However, it's not. Like, I don't want to. I'll talk more about it in like the individual review. But there's also like a lot of time jumps and everything. It's just very. It was just really odd for a self-help book. I guess I've never really read other self-help books, but I definitely think it'd be more interesting than just sort of a boring, I don't know, self-help book that, you know, I'm just kind of probably stereotyping because I've never really read one where it just kind of talks about like, you know, a concept and then kind of just blathers on about it for like 20 pages for each chapter or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of good like little sound bites and tidbits, but it's just, like I said, I don't even really know how to describe this book, I guess, but we'll have to see on the individual review if I can actually make some coherent thoughts and everything. But you know, I'm kind of actually glad I read it just because, like I said, it was branching out and trying something different, and it was just so odd. Not necessarily bad, it was just odd. So there's yeah, that's, I know, a great selling point for the book, right? All right, next up we have Galaxy in Flames, which is the third book in the Horus Heresy series, and the subtitle's The Heresy Revealed, and this one is by Ben Counter. And this one is the sort of the final book in the first story arching trilogy, I guess, following the opening salvo of the Horus Heresy. And this book definitely dealing with sort of the Isfahan, probably, I'm being really dumb. I was going to say the Drop Site Massacre, but that's actually Isfahan 5. But the whole Isfahan 3 debacle. Yeah, I don't want to go into too much and like reveal certain things. But yeah, I definitely enjoy the Horus Heresy. I plan on reading all 54 books at some point. You know, some point like 20 years from now at this pace. But anyways, like I said, I really enjoy this first trilogy. The pacing is really good. Most of the characters are fleshed out pretty well. I really, really enjoy Gabriel Loken, the main sort of viewpoint of these first three books, and sort of his sort of questioning of the whole Imperium of Mankind, and also like staying like true to his own values and stuff, even if they go against the values of everyone around him and what he's, you know, supposed to like think as Legiones Astartes, part of the Luna Wolves, and then the Sons of Horus Legion. But yeah, definitely a really interesting book. If you guys are into the Horus Heresy or into Warhammer 40k and stuff, I encourage you guys to check out the Horus Heresy books. Alright, another one. We got Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. If you guys have followed my channel for a while, you know I hated Way of Kings. But I felt, everyone was like, give it a chance, and I'm actually kind of glad I did, because Words of Radiance definitely was an improvement over the first book, for sure. I had so many problems with that first book. I'll leave my giant discussion panel somewhere in the corner there, and Tim and I have done a discussion panel of this book as well. But yeah, definitely a lot better than the first one. Definitely still had some problems, but I definitely go into a lot more detail in those videos, so I encourage you guys to check those out. But yeah, if you've read Way of Kings and thought it was terrible like me, if you want to go ahead and give Words of Radiance a chance, it's definitely a pick-me-up from the first one. Alright, and then only one more book will make the 12th book, and that is Ruthless River by Holly Fitzgerald. And the subtitle is Love and Survival by Raft on the Amazon's Relentless Madre de Dios. And this book is all about this honeymooning couple was kind of traveling around the world as part of their honeymoon. And when they were in South America, they went through a bunch of kind of debacles and disasters, including a plane crash. But what ends up happening is they decide to take their chances to meet a certain scheduling deadline for their kind of upcoming plans that they wanted to get to. They take a chance instead of taking kind of the safe alternative, which would kind of put them stuck at a kind of nowhere, like little podunk town in the middle of nowhere, I guess. They decided to take a chance rafting down the Amazon, tributary of the Amazon River. Needless to say, it didn't go very well, and after a couple days, they kind of got stuck in a swamp, and were essentially stranded in the middle of, the Amazon basin, somewhere, or in a swamp of the Amazon, and they were stuck for about I can't remember if it was about a month or so, in the Amazon, on their little raft, where they had to fight themselves, their kind of psychological state of being hungry all the time, fighting insects, the water, just, anything you can just imagine being stuck in the Amazon on a little raft in the middle of a swamp for a month. And like I said, I really enjoy these sort of adventure memoirs, exploration memoirs, things like that. This one definitely shows you, the dangers of kind of going gung-ho and just winging it when you're in, somewhere that's maybe not necessarily out of your element, but where you really have to think about, the consequences of your actions, and, coming to terms with nature, and, actually not underestimating, anything that could possibly go wrong when, like I said, if you're in the Amazon, if you're in a desert, you're in, the Arctic or whatever, you really have to humble yourself before nature sometimes. But this book is definitely a work that sort of, makes you appreciate that a lot more. So yeah, definitely check this out if you're into those sort of kind of adventure books. Alright, so there you guys have it. Those were the 12 books that I read in the month of April. Tell me what you guys think about any of these books. If you've read any of the authors, or if you've read any of those books, tell me what your thoughts are down below. I'll be glad to talk to you about them. And just leave what one of your, I doubt, if you remember what your favorite book that you read in April was, leave that down below as well. Been getting lots of good recommendations lately. I hope to have you guys keep them coming. Be glad to talk to you guys about those. But there you guys have it. But yeah, I don't ever know how to transition, like when I do something like April, because I can't just say whatever you read in the month of April, read victoriously. So whatever you're reading for the rest of this month, which is actually July, hopefully I have it edited and uploaded before August. That would really be awkward if I didn't. But anyways, for the rest of July, always remember, read victoriously.